Joining us now in the Hyundai Texans Radio studio, the General Manager and Executive Vice President, Houston Texans, Nick Caserio. Nick, how's it going?
Great to be here.
Game week, and we are super pumped up. And I know you talked about it on 610 a bit, but not only opening day, but opening in that environment at Baltimore, it gets everybody's attention really going.
Yeah, for a number of different reasons. I would say just they've done a great job. Their program historically has been one of the better programs in the league, so we understand the challenges that we're facing, and they have a lot of good football players, and they create a tough environment on the road team coming in. So we certainly have our work cut out for us here this week, but our players are excited about the opportunity in front of us. I've said this a few times. If you like competition, you like football, Sunday in Baltimore will be a good place to be.
Your former club used to have fans that would do that to Marc and Andre up in the box, because that box where they are in Gillette is right there, right by the fans. So, I don't know, similar feelings there. Nick, I know you talked a lot about the offensive line, and there's been a lot of different movement there because of injuries and other things going on. But you also made a waiver claim on Alex Austin, corner out of Oregon State. What can you tell us about Alex coming here?
Yeah, good size, 6'1", 200 pounds, had a lot of experience, played out there at Oregon State, was drafted. I think the Bills took him in the 7th round. Had an opportunity to play fairly extensively in the preseason, and he put together some competitive snaps. There's some similarities, not exactly the same, but some similarities to some of the things that Buffalo's doing defensively, some of the things that we're doing defensively, and then he also had some snaps in the kicking game as well. So the waiver process is an opportunity to get young players in your building, in your program. The reality, whether or not they're going to actually be able to play, whether it's that week or the following week, that's not necessarily what the impetus is for that. It's player that you've evaluated, that you like some qualities and traits, and you have an opportunity to get that player in the building. So historically, there's about 30 to 35-ish waiver claims that typically take place. Even with the single cut down this year, you saw about the same thing. So it kind of reverts back to the mean. So I think there were about the same amount that were claimed. There's a handful of teams that claimed 4 or 5 players. We claimed a few. So, we'll see how it goes here with Alex. Been good to work with here for a few days.
Nick, what can you tell us about the decision-making process, how difficult it is? Because we have these conversations throughout the offseason, beginning of camp, then injuries hit, and you have to decide IR versus PUP versus keep them on the 53 and hope they heal up fast?
Yeah, all those factors you alluded to are part of the discussion. So we just have to figure out, we can't keep everybody, we understand that, but what are the roster mechanizations that we have that are available to us where we can utilize them. And we talk about the team. D'Amico and I talk about the team, I don't want to say daily, but pretty much daily. So we're talking about players. If we make this decision, it could lead to this. So it's very fluid. You have to be able to just react and make quick decisions and move forward. Just understand big picture what the ramifications of a decision could be regardless of what you opt to do.
All right, got Baltimore. We'll ask you a little bit more about Baltimore in a little bit because I like to get the scouting report on the Ravens.
No, we have that ready to go. Don't worry.
Yeah, I figured you would. But preparation in particular for this team, Drew and I were just talking about this a little while ago. I would imagine that for the Ravens, they got a lot of 49ers film, and I would imagine we've got a little bit more of University of Georgia film because of the changes in coaching. How do you kind of go about that part of it, Nick? Because kind of don't know what they're going to do, but you kind of do know a little bit. You know some of the personnel, but you kind of don't know. How do you go about prep for this week?
No, it's a great question. As best you can, you just try to get a baseline understanding of what you think they're going to do, how they're going to deploy their people, and just some of the schematics that are potentially involved. So the preseason, I'd say there's good examples. So a lot of the players that are going to play Sunday that we're going to see haven't literally stepped on the field in a preseason game. So they've practiced with each other, amongst each other. We don't have access to practice, so unless there's something I'm not aware of. But all we can go off of is what we see, and then you can go back and study. As I'd say, a lot of preparation for teams, you're studying history, you're studying coaches, studying their philosophy, what's their training, what's their background, is there going to be something they've done previously that might have some relevance? So the first week, there's always a lot of unknowns on a lot of different levels. I would say specific to Baltimore, there's a personnel component, and there's also a coaching component. Coach Monken's been a very successful coach at his various stops. When you go back and look at some of the things, I think he had Jameis and some of there are a number of different players they had when he was in Tampa Bay. Yep. Mm-hmm. Then he had a period that was he was in college there, and then last year, obviously, what they did at Georgia. So you can sort of use that. But really what you're going to do, you're going to cater your scheme to your players, and then who are the players, and that'll ultimately dictate how you're going to play the game.
It's got to put a premium on in-game adjustments, especially opening week against an opponent like this with all the mystery.
Yeah, I would say there's a good shot by the end of the first quarter you'll have an idea of how the game is going to be played, and it'll kind of declare on both sides of the ball, including the kicking game as well. So there's going to be some concepts that probably repeat during the course of the game. You might dress it up a little bit with a different formation. So that's where you have to go back and look at the tablets. All right, what happened on the series? Where do we have an issue? All right, if they do this, is there something else that we can do to combat it? To your point, Mark, there's a little bit of cat and mouse that takes place during the course of the game. But typically by the end of the first quarter, the game is going to declare, and you should have an idea about what the expectation is going to be moving forward.
How much does it help that you had 2 road preseason games just for the whole operation of it all? Travel, being in an opposing environment and dealing with that. Now you're on the road for the opener.
Yeah, you kind of take that out of it because you're more familiar with it. Now you can focus on football. Mm-hmm. So okay, we're going to leave the stadium at a certain time. We're going to go to the airport. Okay, the plane's set up a certain way. When we get to the hotel, what's the routine? So the biggest difference for us is get up and go. So all the preseason games have been sort of late in the day, later in the day. Yeah. This is a 1 o'clock start, which will be 12 o'clock Central Time. So this is get up and go. Not too dissimilar to practice. So we practice in the morning. So at least our players are familiar with getting up, getting going. The schedule is going to be set up during the course of the week where we're going to practice still in the morning. Players will come in early. We're going to meet before practice. So you get moving. You kind of can establish your routine. But to your point, some of the operational things, we're all comfortable with it. So now we just got to go out there and focus on playing good football.
Nick, C.J. Stroud named a captain. Hasn't played an NFL game yet. He's played in the preseason. You could see each and every game of the preseason, he got more and more comfortable as he went through. And that seemed to be kind of be a theme with CJ. The first of anything, okay, had some area where he could improve. But then every single time he did something, a second time it got better and better. What are your expectations for CJ on Sunday facing a Ravens defense that we know it's loaded with some talent?
Yeah, I think the point that you made, you're really looking for just improvement in all players. So where they start, where they end up, typically it's going to take a little bit of time. So do not make the same mistake twice. Do you understand what happened on the play? Do you understand what the correction or modification or something that we can do a little bit different? So I think the most important thing for our players and CJ in particular is just one play at a time. That's all we can control is that play. So focus on that play, try to execute it, then go to the next play and just try to stack multiple plays on top of each other. But I would say as a team, from where we started to where we are now, we've certainly made some progress. And, this is another opportunity on Sunday to see how much progress we've made, to your point, against a, really good football team. Yeah.
You've been to a lot of practices. I can remember the day they first used music here at practice as opposed to the crowd noise piped in, which I always wondered, is this from a concert? Where did they get this crowd noise from? It's just blaring the whole time. But then they went to the music. Can you speak to that a little bit, that evolution? Because you need noise of some part, of some nature to get ready for this environment.
No, it definitely has evolved. I would say going on the road, you're just dealing with volume. So how do you simulate volume? So because there's a communication component that's going to be involved. There's verbal and nonverbal communication. And when you're on defense on the road, like you can hear yourself talk. When you're on offense on the road, typically you probably can't hear anything. So how do you simulate that in practice? Because you're trying to prepare the players for the conditions and environment that they're going to face that particular Sunday. So I would say the evolution of the music component adds a little juice, adds a little vibe to practice. So I think the players, when they have ownership of that, so it kind of maybe gets them going a little bit as opposed to hearing just some crowd noise just pumped in, the kind of a monotone the whole practice.
Yep. All right, we've reached that part of the program. It's my favorite part. I always love this because I don't know that I've met anybody that really can understand or know the personnel on the other side the way that you do, and you have no notes in front of you, just rip it off. The scouting report on Baltimore. Some guy named, what's his name, quarterback?
Lamar Jackson. Yeah.
Vaguely
familiar.
He's
pro day
pretty
workout,
good.
for the record.
Oh, you were?
Yes, I was there.
Yeah, he's pretty good. But what do the Ravens have? I mean, it's first game, so there are going to be some differences. But going in, what's the scouting report on the Ravens, Nick?
Yeah, I would say really, John, it starts at the top. So you're looking at just when you look at their program, it's about consistency and it's about stability. So it starts at the top with Steve as the owner. And then really from Ozzie to Eric, I mean, essentially they've been there from the inception of the program. So there's a foundation that's in place. They have a very successful track record. And the fact that Coach Harbaugh is this 15th or 16th year as the head coach, I mean, I want to say him, Coach Reed, and Coach Belichick, I think, are the longest tenured coaches. And to stay in a program that long and have as much success, speaks to, I'd say, the stability at the top of the organization. And I think there's certainly a model that teams can follow. As far as the team is concerned, I'd say they have a lot of, I would say, elite football players, not just on one side of the ball or the other. So offensively, I mean, everybody talks about Lamar, and rightfully so. It starts with him. And really probably the guy that should get more recognition than he does, who, forget about one of the best tight ends, he's probably one of the best football players in the league, is Marc Andrews. So they've revamped their skill group, so brought in Odell, drafted Zay in the first round. Bateman's a holdover who they drafted in the first round a few years ago. They signed Aguilar, who's kind of been a couple different spots. So they have a lot of speed on the perimeter of their team offensively. They're probably going to be a little bit more 11 and 12. And so Andrews, we talked about him. And a guy that they've talked about quite a bit during the preseason here is Isaiah Likely, who had some production as a rookie. So it's a very athletic skill group. Dobbins is coming off an injury, but they kind of have a good 1-2 punch with Dobbins and Gus Edwards. And then a guy that actually put an IR, Keaton Mitchell, who had a really good camp, was fast as hell. So they've made probably more changes on the periph with the skill group, and the offensive line, I would say, is pretty much intact. Stanley, they had a left guard competition who John Simpson won that. And then, Linderbaum is developing into one of the better centers in the league. Zeitler's been a good player for a long time, and Morgan Moses. So they have some continuity in the front. Most of the a couple skill positions, they have people come back, and they also have some new skill players. And the defensive side of the ball, which I would say this organization has really hung their hat on, nothing's really changed in terms of how they play defense. They've been a good situational team. They were good on third down. They're good against the run. So they put a lot of stress on you. So even though they've changed coordinators through the years from Dean to Wink, even go back to Rex to Wink, and then Coach McDonald, his second year in the system. So good front, a bunch of, I would say, big, strong, physical players in the front, two young, good edge players in Ajabo and Owa. They signed JD here, kind of the end of training camp, to give them some depth. Robinson, who they took in the fourth round, a kid from Ole Miss, kind of is working his way in, kind of like Dylan Horton, for us. And really, their two best football players on that side of the ball are Roquan and Patrick Queen. So they literally make every tackle, every play. And I would say those are two players but they're on the field for every snap. It's not, take them off the field. They're on the field for every snap. Roquan got rewarded with a contract extension at the end of the season, and rightfully so. He's probably one of the best defensive players in the league. And in the secondary, they're a little bit like us on the offensive line. They've just had some moving parts here, just injuries and a number of other things, specifically a corner. So they've got some younger players. They got some experienced players. And Hamilton's role will probably transition here a little bit with the trade of Chuck Clark. And Marcus Williams is, I would say, a pretty steadying force back there. So, and then I would say they're arguably one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the kicking game. So that's Coach Harbaugh's background. So they put a lot of emphasis in the kicking game. The best kicker in the history of the NFL, and Justin Tucker, good punter. So just holistically, from top to bottom, organizationally, and in all 3 phases, that's what we're facing. So we understand the challenge in front of us. Now it's our job to go out there and understand who we're playing, and then be able to go out there and execute. And in the end, it's going to come down to us being able to handle X amount of plays situationally, and we'll see how it goes.
Boy, I didn't enjoy that at all. My goodness. Good insight there on the Ravens, who were the Browns. So I want to get into this for a second here. Your family, how did everybody react, Nick? You're from that part of the country where there are a lot of Browns fans, and I don't want to assume anything, but that must have been kind of painful for members of the Caserio family.
Yes, so my dad, actually going back, was at the Brian Sipe Red Right 88 game. He was in the end zone for that game. So, and then in 90, whatever that was, the mid-90s, so I was in high school, transitioning to college there when they went through the whole, Bill was a part of it, and then they left.
They won a playoff game against the Patriots.
So I think the one thing you see is, Cleveland is a football town. It's a blue-collar football town. So when there was a void, you're looking for ways to kind of fill that void there a little bit. So when they kind of, let's say, reappeared, if you will. So I think there was some natural excitement, and they've done a good job here of putting themselves in a position to put a competitive team on the field. But I think the one thing that we've all learned in the NFL is about transition and change. That's a pretty big transition and change, and a lot of folks that were in Cleveland at the time, Ozzie was still playing, and Ozzie transitioned from playing into his role with the Ravens. So you have a lot of, I'd say, people rooted in Cleveland that are now with Baltimore. So, but that's the evolution of the NFL.
So in Cleveland, Is Art Modell a bad word? Or I should say, how bad of a bad word is it? Is it kind of like Bud Adams? I shouldn't say that. But
I don't know if I've had that conversation where anybody has mentioned Mr. Modell. So just leave it at that.
or wants to at that point.
One note on the offensive line and what the Texans are going through here. Having a back like Dameon Pierce, is that a steadying force where, hey, you just give me a crack of daylight, I'm going to make the very most out of it? How valuable is he to whatever is going on, no matter what is going on up front?
Sure. Regardless of what's going on, we're going to need everybody on Sunday. On any given Sunday, we're going to need everybody. So I think what we need to do is figure out, all right, what are some positive plays? How can we do it with whom? And create an opportunity for our team to gain some yards and move the ball. So in the end, all 11 offensive football is about 11 people relying on each other, and it's all tied together.
Okay, can you recite the emergency third quarterback rules from your head? I saw those pop up yesterday, and it's like 3 pages worth, and I was blown away. But Nick, your thoughts on that decision by the NFL to allow that emergency third quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest way to look at it, and if I'm wrong, then our PR department can crush me, but essentially the player's inactive, but you can designate him on game day, a certain role, whatever that is, and he's available only if something happens to the 2 other quarterbacks.
Right.
That's the simplest way to look at it. So go through warm-up, stand on the sidelines, nothing really changed. So I think sometimes when a new rule is implemented, there's mountains of information. You try to distill it down and say, all right, what's the practical application? So it'll be interesting to kind of see how teams choose to do it. It looks like there was about 12 or 13 teams that carried 3 quarterbacks on the roster. The others have 2 plus, 1 on the practice squad, 1 or 2 on the practice squad. So it's whatever you think is best for your situation. So you don't necessarily have to allocate another spot on game day. He's an active player, and if you need to use him at some point where it becomes relevant, and then you probably got some bigger issues, but that means something else happened with the 2 other players that, had played previously.
Yeah.
What's the crab cake consumption going to be like for you this weekend?
It'll be up to Ladd to see if he has that on the menu there. So, but it'll probably, actually, I'm working a crab cake once in a while. So
I was going to say, does crab cake fit into the Nick Caserio diet?
I would say is a change up on the fish seafood front. So I'll work one in, not regularly, but throw
cheat
one in
day
there.
sort of thing.
Yeah, maybe once a month.
They got to
Try
be the
throw
good
one in
ones
there.
with lots of crab, not the filler.
Yeah, it's got to be
I'm
mostly
probably
crab.
going to get yelled at for saying this, but Coach Belichick actually used to have crab cakes with a special kind of sauce sent to him. So like each Sunday after a game, he would have those because he spent a lot of time there. So he loved them. So
he did.
He was, sometimes some people enjoy crab cakes. I wouldn't say I'm a crab cake guy, but I'll mix it in once in a while.
You're not having them flown in. All right. Nick, thanks a lot for joining us. Good luck.
Thanks, guys.